First of all, my name is Bryan Kelly. I'm from Cerner Corporation. We're a healthcare company. Let's see here. I'd like to first thank everybody who is involved in putting this conference together. It takes a lot of work, and I know there was a lot of submissions, so I greatly appreciate getting picked to give this talk. This evening, I'll be talking about how Cerner manages the Pivotal platform for a variety of developers and use cases and IaaSes. And kind of the workflows that we take and automate and the process that we go about it and how we run the platform as a product. So how we got here. Let's see here. I was on a product team at Cerner for about 12, 13 years in an organization that's implemented at least 10 plus new products to Cerner over the past 10 years with a varying degree of requirements such as interoperability, HIPAA, interoperability between Millenniums, interoperability between Millennium, which is our healthcare software, and other healthcare software. And we had a lot of development teams that had operational responsibility in production. So what that meant is we already had kind of that Netflix mindset of DevOps. We worked with our ops team. When there would be an issue, we'd be on the phone. There's a few of them in the audience today. Sometimes it's our fault, sometimes it wasn't our fault, but we were in the process. We were on the live line and having to defend why something would go down, or if there was problems, and let's just be honest, there was a lot of problems. And then we made problems worse in 2015, we started to realize that we needed a platform team because things got so worse because we were trying to do microservices and we started trying to do Spring Cloud. And we went from having a couple monoliths to probably easily 65 to 70 microservices in our organization. And we needed a platform, and we really needed a platform team. There was no way we were going to continue to do what we were doing, and we were in denial for a while. But we made the realization in 2015 that we needed to do better. So we started to decide that we were going to be that platform team. We were going to try to fill that void for just our organization. We weren't necessarily going to be the end-all be-all for all of Cerner. Cerner's too big of a company, but there was a pocket that it made sense for emerging development. And so we said, let's go build a platform that we would want to have. And so we started with Spring Boot. We started modernizing Spring Boot applications, and then we started saying, let's go run it with some empathy. So basically, we got kind of frustrated because we always felt very disenfranchised by those that were our operations team. There was a lot of friction there, and there was a lot of therapy that needed to happen. And we thought maybe the therapy could come from a little bit of empathy. First, we wanted to build trust with developers. We wanted to go to the development teams and go, what is working for you? What isn't working for you? What could be better? We wanted to go to the business, and we wanted to build trust with the business and go, hey, what can we do to help the business run more efficiently? How can we make the business be happy with the output that the developers are putting in? But we also had to build trust with the business so that they would invest in developers' time to re-platform or modernize their applications. Without buy-in from the business, developers can sit here all day long and say, well, I got this Kubernetes cluster running on some Raspberry Pis under my desk, but that doesn't do anybody any good in production. You have to have buy-in from the business if you're in an enterprise. But we also were very honest with our developers, which we consider our consumers of our platform, about what gaps we may have. We're not going to solve all the problems day one. So we would listen to them, we'd take note of what those gaps are, and we'll talk about what we do with them later. All teams, we learned very early on, had different starting points. Some were just on Tomcat, some were on JBoss, some were on WebSphere. Some had already moved to Tomcat and were more modern, but they still needed better ways to get their applications into production. They were having lots of issues with delivery. So we also said we need to get a feedback loop in place. We need to go out and we need to interview developers one-on-one. What we don't want to do is put developers in a room because the noisiest developer is going to get all the attention. We want to go to teams and we want to interview them and we want to get their feedback and we want to do it on a case-by-case basis so we get an honest feedback on what their problems are, because some things have merit, some things don't have merit. Sometimes there's really glaring problems, but the quietest people have them and they're not getting that feedback back to us. We also interviewed the business unit leads so that we'd understand what is the thing that isn't getting done. Why is there stuff not getting into production? Why is the iteration loops not closed the way there was a lot of disconnect between what the business thought they were getting and what developers were producing, and we were trying to help close that gap. I also use this opportunity to say the feedback loop isn't just for your company. You should be providing feedback loop to your vendors. We've provided feedback to New Relic, we've provided feedback to Pivotal, we've provided feedback to even AWS about the experience that we've had in running in their infrastructure. Same with VMware. Vendors only get better by getting feedback. They're not going to be able to get better by not hearing what is the experience that their consumers have. Just like we can't run a platform without getting feedback from our developers. We also provide a lot of feedback back to OSS. The other day I was talking about how we've probably went, 24 months without an incident with a build pack upgrade. We recently took a Java build pack upgrade that didn't work for a specific use case. Instead of going through support channels and all of that, we went directly to the OSS project and we raised an issue. And the maintainers of the project that work on the development team gave us feedback. We didn't have to go through a bunch of intermediary resources to get that feedback to them, and we have a plan now of how that's going to get fixed. We also got within the hours what the workaround could be in that use case for the short time that we weren't going to be able to get a fix from them. We also track all of our feedback in a backlog, and we prioritize it. So if we find something that we need to give back to OSS, we track it as something we need to give feedback on, and we put it in our backlog, and we prioritize how much time we're going to spend for a given week on that feedback. Any feedback that we get, we put in a backlog. Any developer is willing to give us feedback in our backlogs. Everything is open and transparent. We also strongly encourage teams, and we do this ourselves as the platform team, to do value stream mapping. In the case of the platform right now, the major things that we're monitoring is the number of stem cell updates that we're taking on a regular basis, the number of product updates, the number of developers that we support, the number of onboarding requests that we get, because we're still in our infancy. We're bringing new teams on a fairly frequent basis. So we kind of have to build a backlog of onboarding requests and track those requests. And we're trying to get better with our SLAs. We're trying to get better with the turnaround, but we don't want people to feel like it's a ticketing process. When they log an onboarding request to us, what we want to do is have an inception with them. We want to sit down with them. We want to have that be our first interview with them, have them understand what it means to run in a public cloud, what it means to run on PAS, and just kind of monitor our process of how we're onboarding them. We also monitor the time from a release on Pivnet to when we deploy it in a foundation. And some of these things we're still improving on, by the way, too. One of the first things that we found when running this as a product that's kind of unique, given my product background, was we needed to automate onboarding workflows. In the past, when you'd have something that got onboarded on, say, VMware, someone would go into a UI and spin up a VM for them. Well, that's not really the way the cloud works anymore. That process is turning more self-service, but we still have to onboard the developers that are going to take those self-service actions. So we have onboarding through CF management that's completely pull request driven. We treat it as code, what everybody has access to on the platform. This provides us a lot of great tracing that we otherwise wouldn't have, which is when did a developer get access, when was their access revoked, who granted the access, was a quorum collected on giving them access, because we're giving them a lot of power by giving them access to a platform. App transformation analysis may also be done through PRs back to the application teams. We're going to try to work on a process, this is something that's still in its infancy, where when a team onboards, we're going to analyze their code and tell them things that they could do to make it more cloud native so that they would have a better experience running in a cloud or on PaaS. We also do PR-driven workflows for PKS cluster creation and provisioning and granting developers access to the clusters. And all PRs are tracked in a backlog and, again, prioritized. Again, it goes back to that whole treating it as a product. These are not tickets. It's a backlog of things. They are prioritized. We try to give the developers who's asking for it feedback. We also are welcoming things that developers open PRs for will get a quicker turnaround time because we don't have to go in and spend the time doing the configuration ourselves. We are just reviewing that configuration, so our SLAs are much faster. We automate our maintenance workflows, all of them. So whenever there's a product update from Pivotal Network, it results in a PR. When a new stem cell is released on Pivotal Network, it results in a PR. When we make changes to the product, just like we stress this to the application teams, all changes are treated as code that configure the product. So that could be for PaaS, for data services, contact your local Pivotal rep, get in contact with the PCF automation team. They have some really great documentation on how to do this that's now GA. It has saved us a ton of time in the amount of time it takes to spin up our next foundation on an IaaS. We went from it taking roughly 6 hours to 12 hours of manual configuration and time to where we can stand up brand new foundations with pretty much everything installed that we would normally have in about 4 hours. And it's really IaaS independent. Configuration of products should be consistent between IaaSes. So we have developers now that are pushing workloads to Azure, AWS, and vSphere. We make sure that the platform is consistent in all of those environments. The developer should not care what the environment is that they're pushing to. There may be new capabilities. So what I don't want to say is we're not blunting the capabilities of that IaaS. So when a team deploys to Azure, they'll have the Azure Service Broker. That means they'll get access to Azure data services like Cosmos DB, and they can bind those data services to their application. But that's a differentiating feature on Azure, but the workflow and the pipeline construction that that team will have to do to push to that IaaS should be the same. This really helps with disaster recovery or disaster avoidance, because what you can do is you could set up 2 foundations side by side in 2 different IaaSes in 2 different regions, deploy the same code to both of them, and know with almost 100% certainty that it's going to behave the exact same way. For us, that's a big deal. That was something we did not have. Environmental consistency was something that we struggled with for a very long time, and this is the first time that we've gotten an opportunity to keep it consistent. This goes back to the product mindset where we're providing this as a product to our developers, and as a product we're wanting to make sure that they get what they pay for. So this is kind of our day in the life of our process. We have a simple pipeline I'll show here in a minute that pulls for product updates every hour from Pivnet. It pulls for stem cell updates every hour from Pivotal Network. And why we're doing that is we want to get, if there's a new CVE that's minted and fixed in a stem cell, we want to get that out as quickly as possible, but we also want to do it safe. We want to go fast, but we want to be safe. So these PRs are open, a pull request is open to our sandbox foundation for a new stem cell that comes out. So that pipeline kind of looks like this. So this pipeline here, it's a little hard to see, but these are all the stem cells that we currently support. Windows is even in there, which is kind of crazy. So there's 456 stem cells, 315, and ironically, today, while we were in the conference, a new stem cell came out, right? Because we pulled every hour, got published onto Pivnet, that update got taken, and we're going to be able to roll that out during this presentation if we wanted to. And we know what all products are that consumes that update. And this opens a pull request to every single IaaS that we have a sandbox in. Right now we have 3. So if we go back to the slides, it knows of every IaaS that the product is associated to. Not all products go to all IaaSes, like the Azure Service Broker doesn't go to AWS, for instance, or to vSphere today. Updates detect creates a PR for any changes to stem cell or products per IaaS. So what that results in is it starts to build an automated backlog. Kind of looks like this. This automated backlog was created by our bot that detected that there was an update on Pivnet this afternoon, right before we came in here, 3 hours ago. And it opened this PR up against 3 different IaaSes for the single sign-on service had a new stem cell. Okay. So the cool thing about this is the one for Azure. I could go into this guy, and the only file that changed was the stem cell version. The other thing that pipeline does that I kind of glossed over was we like to work in a more air-gapped environment. So what it does is it takes the stem cell off of Pivnet and it puts it in an S3 bucket. This means that when we go to deploy in production, we're not reliant on Pivnet to be up. We have it in an S3 bucket. We have a local copy of it. We can scan it. We can do anything we want with it. We know what it was. On occasion, it gets pulled off of Pivnet. If that does happen, we still have a copy of it, even though we shouldn't use it once it's been pulled. They do a pretty good job of notifying us if that happens. But we have a copy of it. That's the main point there. So we also put labels on our pull requests. This seems like a very naive thing, but this is how we do value stream mapping for the way we treat it as a product. All these labels on the right side were generated that basically allows us to do a cross-section search on what products have we taken updates on, what stem cells did we take a stem cell upgrade, in what IaaS, in what region, and what foundation. Telemetry is great. Pivotal's got a telemetry product. It does a really great job, but I can't service that yet to my developers. So the beauty that this provides us is transparency to the consumers of our foundations. They can go in and say, okay, I'm deploying my code to this foundation in Azure in Central US or in AWS US West 2, and I notice something different. Or I'm wanting to take value, like in the case of single sign-on, I'm wanting to use a new feature that's in that product or in that service or in PAS. Do I have the version deployed? Most of the time, I hope the answer is yes before you ever get wind of getting to know of the product version that's released, because our SLA right now is within 7 days of something hitting Pivnet, it's in production. So if we go in here, what we could do right now, since this is for sandbox, is if I squash and merge this one and delete, and then let's see here, if we go back to that list, and we could go to AWS as well, and we can squash and merge that. What we should see happen is we have another pipeline over here, and in a few minutes it's going to start to flicker. And it's going to start the whole process of performing an update of that stem cell and repaving the VMs associated to it in production, or not production, sandbox. If you are familiar with Concourse, this pipeline looks a little different than some that you may have used. One of the major things that we added here was a regulator. And what that regulator does is it's a time trigger that we actually don't trigger it off of time, it's triggered off of a webhook. That's what actually triggers it, but we use it to regulate the updates to the product version, the stem cell version, before we trigger the time. This ensures that both the product version and the stem cell version flow through individually, but still trigger in a synchronized fashion. So we don't apply a product update before we apply a stem cell version, and so on and so forth. And just because I think it's fun, this is the one for AWS, the other one's for Azure. They're both going at the same time. I think it's cool. So let's see here, go back to my slides. So this is the number of stem cell updates that we've taken since this time last year, all the way through to production, through this process. And then you need to multiply those now by 6, because that's the number of foundations that we have. So we are churning out stem cell updates about every 7 to 14 days, which means the average length of time that our VMs live in any environment is less than 14 days, which gives you it's kind of an unbelievable security posture, because as talked about in some of the repave or the 3Rs blog posts that exists on Pivotal's blog, an advanced persistent threat can't live very long in an environment, or malware can't live very long in an environment, or viruses cannot live long in an environment, or a compromised VM in general cannot live long in an environment that's getting repaved every 7 days. And it's not just getting repaved, it's getting repaved with a new stem cell, which means any vulnerability that likely existed in that 7 days ago no longer exists in that stem cell. This also allowed us to do product updates. So we've taken 30 CF product updates. So we try to be N-7 days on product updates. These updates are version bumps. So 2.4 to 2.5 is included in that, 2.5 to 2.6, and then patch release versions are also included in that. And as you can see, if you know kind of the release cycles of the Pivotal teams, they are releasing on a fairly aggressive cycle. CF releases pretty much every 2 to 3 weeks. Rabbit releases 2 times a quarter. MySQL releases 1 time a quarter. Same with Redis. So this is pretty, if you're not keeping up with this, or you're N-2 in this world, you're going to fall behind really, really fast. And that's something that we realized very early on, because we wanted to keep the platform team low in terms of resources. So we're still doing all of this with 2 people, because all of the automation is allowing us to not have to care and feed for this or do the toil. Let's see here. So I was going to demo after that, but I went ahead and demoed in the middle. I'll take questions, and then I had one more thing. Yes, sir.
So, how do you handle the property? Because I've used platform on quite a bit, and I noticed that not all tiles are created equal, so
Yeah.
doesn't always correct properties.
Yeah. Okay, so the question was, there's some deficiencies in OM. where the properties that it grabs through the OM CLI at times will not grab everything and not all tiles are created equal. That is absolutely true. It is nothing that I'm doing here that's going to solve those problems. As I said earlier, that's a gap. I'm completely transparent about that. We've been working actively with the PCF automation team, and they've got some really great suggestions about what they're going to do in the future for that. One trick that I have is if there is something that doesn't get exported, you can still kind of deduce what the property is by going into OM or into OpsMan, and you can inspect things for now. But it's gotten a lot better, I will say that. So in OM 4.0 or 4.1, it is much, much better, and some of it did require some tile modifications. That is a known issue that they've been actively working on. There was news that I got this week as well in regards to that, which is the product teams have vowed, and they've taken a pinky swear, to not introduce new properties in patch versions, so that you can continue to move as quickly as you possibly can with this kind of process. What that allows for you, though, is not really to set it and forget it, but you can get pretty close to setting and forgetting it and just saying, I'll look at the release notes, which is normally what we do, make sure that this is going to be a fairly decent process or a non-impactful change, and make that decision one time, merge it in, and then it kind of just disseminates out to all of your foundations. Yes, sir. We use the open source version from Pivotal.
So how you guys are handling when you're doing automation of those this much of frequency on demand?
Okay, so the question was how do we handle the downtime that can occur with the Redis tile or the MySQL tile if we're doing it every 7 days? Well, the answer is we don't do it every 7 days. It's another gap. We do it every 21 days. It's agreed upon maintenance windows for everybody that's on the platform. We do it every 21 days in client-facing domains or client-facing foundations. If it's a developer foundation, it's on the same cadence that all the rest of the products are at. We just do it after business hours. We just queue it up to happen after 5 o'clock Central Time in the US, and we take those updates during that period of time. MySQL and Redis have gotten really good at leveraging capabilities that make their downtimes very, very small and very short. So in those environments where we do it more frequently, especially for Redis, we use a feature called Bosh Hot Swap, which has reduced the period of time to under 30 seconds that the service is down, because it spins up a brand new VM next to the VM that was already there, and then swaps the volume on it, and then destroys the VM that used to be there later. We hope to see this be a capability that's turned on in MySQL as well. Or what would be really nice is seeing those data services get leveled up and running on Kubernetes. I will stress we do this exact same process for managing PKS clusters. Any other questions? Oh, yes, sir. We have automated integration testing that is running every 5 minutes. That's a certified application pipeline that's continuously running that tests the bindings of the services and the applications being pushed. We also rely on HealthWatch, which is also doing Bosh health checks, and that they're also doing app pushes. So we have alarms hooked up to all those things, and so we're just doing them continuously because it's not always when we change it that we need to test it. Sometimes other gnarly things can happen to service brokers, such as the VM going out for lunch and not coming back, and for whatever reason, resurrection not working. We'll know. So I don't believe that it matters what language at this layer running those integration tests. The reason why is most of the data services have done a really good job of being AB. Is it ABI? AB. I can't remember. They do a really good job of not breaking passivity to languages. Now, what I will say is for stem cells, I really make that a non-event. When we make a stem cell change, nothing about the way that those languages interface with those data services should change. When we do take a data service change that does bump the data service version, we hold office hours every week and we let teams know that we're going to do this and to be on the lookout. But I'll be completely frank, there's been very few and far between. We have Node.js, Python, Java, Go, Ruby in the platform. And so we'll catch things pretty quickly. We do a pretty good job. There was a question in the back. Yes, sir.
So, say the
Okay, so the question was, do we use the PCF automation reference pipelines, or did we diverge quite a bit? To my knowledge, there is no reference pipeline from PCF automation. There's just a bunch of tasks. We use the tasks, but we assemble them, or we use it's like Legos. We put it together ourselves the way that we see fit. What we do make use of is what's called selective deploys with floating stem cells set to false. And we specify specifically what stem cell and what product version we want to stage and have applied. Our pipelines only modify one product at a time. They do not modify all the products on a given foundation to minimize the impact that change will have. So after the stem cells came out today, we have 45 PRs that we have to merge, each of those representing a combination of product to stem cell to IaaS. And then we'll do 45 in sandbox, we'll do 45 in dev, and then we'll do 45 in production. And we get full transparency. And it's really nice because what it has allowed for us to do, I'll just kind of bridge into this, is those pipelines have been able to have security we can be transparent to security when the changes are going through. It's also added the ability to have security be a part of our feedback loop. So they actually are putting items in our backlog, and that's something I should have stressed earlier. Security is putting items in our backlog because they like the fact that we're taking the stem cells updates so frequently and the product updates so frequently, that they are adding new things that otherwise we would have had a hard time implementing, such as scans and things that we need to do to make our environments more secure for purposes for government agencies to use and whatnot. We're able to focus on those things because we're not having to focus on this kind of work. But yeah, I think that's our time. So good questions. Thank you everybody for attending my talk.